Hello, everyone, again. Welcome back. We now have our panel on scaling binder jetting production with standards, specs for additive manufacturing. We have our moderator, Hallee Deutchman, PhD, Director of Materials and Manufacturing Technology at Fast Radius, and our panelist, Dan Brunemer, and Huff, Applications Director at GE Additive, Tyler LeBrun, Director L-PBF, Technology Applications at Uniformity Labs, John Meyer, Technical Manager of Carpenter Additive, and Steve Hudelson, Process Lead of. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. I will hand it over to you, Hallee.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. As she mentioned, we will be discussing the scaling binder jetting production with standards, spec for additive manufacturing. There's John. So as soon as John logs in, I'd actually like to go around and have each one of our panelists introduce themselves and sort of talk about their expertise and where their focus is in the standard space. Richard, you're first on my screen. Would you like to go first?
Sure, yes. My name is Richard Huff. I am the Applications Director for Binder Jet. I work with our customers and our potential customers to identify applications for the technology, work to develop business cases and develop plans to prove out the technology and implement it for their applications. I've been working in binder jet for a number of years now, both in the non-metallic and metallic side.
Thanks. Dan, you're next.
Hey, can you hear me? Because I can't see myself and my camera doesn't seem to work.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'm Dan Brunemer. I'll be entering my 20th year here at ExOne this May. I'm our technical fellow. And yeah, my work in standards is actually pretty new. And I'm sorry, I might not have answered the whole question.
Close enough.
I'm kind of like trying to screw with my.
Steve, well, you want to go next? We'll give Dan a second to get his tech figured out.
Yeah, hi, I'm Steve Hudelson from Desktop Metal. I lead the process development for our binder jetting, including materials development. And I guess I'm the relative newbie for binder jetting. I've been at Desktop for 3 years, which is my first gig in 3D printing, but I was in Solar doing similar types of things with process and materials development before that. And like Dan, this is also my first standards development. So it's definitely been a learning experience for me.
Tyler?
My name is Tyler LeBrun. I'm the Director of Laser Powder Bed Fusion Technology Applications at Uniformity Labs in the Bay Area. My background in additive manufacturing has been everywhere from introduction at Rocketdyne in Southern California years ago. Did my PhD in Japan in additive manufacturing, and also did a lot of work with Blue Origin up in the Seattle area, and now currently work a little bit on the feedstock side with Uniformity Labs in the Bay Area, but have been with SAE and ASTM for a couple of years now, and so this is the document that I've helped to sponsor for the committee, and this group of people has been with me every step of the way.
Thanks. And so while we wait for Don to rejoin us, I'll introduce myself. Hallee Deutchman. I am the Director of Materials and Manufacturing Technology at Fast Radius. We're a production additive manufacturing partner. PhD in materials engineering, specifically advanced nickel-based superalloys. Started my career in additive about 7 years ago at Honeywell Aerospace. Then went to Blue Origin, where I was the Principal Technologist for advanced manufacturing materials, and have been at Fast Radius for about 1.5 years. John, Meyer, and I were 2 of the founders of the SAE additive committee that we'll be discussing today, almost 5 years ago, which is kind of crazy. John, you want to introduce yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm still working on the camera, but I'm John Meyer. I'm with Carpenter Additive. I work in R&D in our Reading, Pennsylvania facility. So my background is in powder manufacturing and additive manufacturing. As Hallee mentioned, I've been in the committee since its very beginning, and I'm happy to be a part of this.
Great. So kicking this off, I wanted John and myself to give a little background on how this committee started and what exactly it takes to get a standards designated organization to begin looking into new technology. So a little over 5 years ago, the FAA wrote a letter to the Society of Automotive Engineers, specifically the Aerospace Materials Specification Group, encouraging them to look into this new technology and regulating it, and how to basically bring it up to par to be ready for aerospace implementation. John and I can to the fact that it was a lot of years of arguing, very heated arguments, very technical arguments, to get to where we are today, which, John, I think we have 15-ish released specs or specs on their way, covering material, process, part, actually, finished part. We started with laser powder bed fusion and electron beam fusion, and have now obviously started branching into some of the other additive manufacturing spaces, and have focused on nickel, and are now branching into titanium and aluminum and sort of further out. John, did I miss anything?
I think you hit most of them. I think the other thing to mention is that on top of the metallics, we also have a polymeric portion or non-metallic portion of the committee that also has released their first set of specifications. The other thing I'd highlight is that there's a group of process-related specifications that are very, I wouldn't say very prescriptive, but they do have requirements for fixed practice with a certain level of process control documentation, the definition of critical process variables, and other requirements for qualification of the process. And also on the, so there's a lot of information in there. I think probably one of the most in-depth in terms of the technical requirements, and so that is part of why we had such a long few years of active discussion and deliberation to reach that point.
Exactly. So I'm going to start asking everybody questions, or sort of throwing questions out. For those of you who are kind enough to join us for this panel, please toss your questions into the question and answer section, and we'll start answering them. But I will kick it off. So the first question I have is, why did we all join this committee? Dan, since obviously you love standards, you can kick us off with that one.
Yeah, well, I mean, so, excuse me, I actually was, I did join ASTM like back when F42 was first, founded, and I just really didn't understand how it worked, I don't think, and I was in for about a year before, I was just kind of like walked away from it. And when my boss, Rick Lucas, asked me to get involved with Tyler and join this group that wanted to do these binder jetting standards, I just kind of looked a little bit into it, talked to people about, why am I being asked to do this? And yeah, I think that actually the presentation right before us kind of like in any kind of a highly regulated industry, you're just not going to be putting parts in people's harm's way if you do not demonstrate a certain amount of absolute control over your manufacturing process. And standards are what we all use and need to demonstrate that we can do that. And without them, I just think that our growth in general, especially in regulated industries like medical, like oil and gas, like offshore, without these standards, I think our growth will be self-limiting.
John, what about you?
Sorry, I was actually to switch browsers there. The camera's been working all day long, and got in here and it didn't work. So I had to do a quick on-the-fly installation of a whole new web browser. So if you wouldn't mind repeating that question.
Sure. Why did you join the committee?
So, as I mentioned, I think we were at the point in 2015 where it was getting to the point where there was enough critical mass for us to try to coalesce around and adopt some best practices. There were some standards out there that really left a lot up to the purchaser and supplier to sort of hash out for themselves, and it didn't really provide a lot of guidance to users or to regulatory agencies as to what is a good practice, what is a good means of having these quality requirements fulfilled. So I think we kind of joined and hoped to get out of that, sort of throwing the ideas of how to go about things into the forum of public consensus and get together with the subject matter experts and try to, for the sake of all of the air flying population, try to come up with, as an industry, our best foot forward. And so that's, why we tried to help, push that along and be part of the effort is to try to create some organization that could help to lower the barrier for entry for future adoption, but at the same time also raise the quality and make sure that there's a minimum hurdle that everyone is at least meeting as a baseline set of requirements.
Great. Richard?
Yeah, so I think I was a little late, one of the later folks to join this committee, but I think Dan had reached out to me and asked me to join, and due to my background in binder jet, and it is a new technology. You think about regulated industries, but I mean, really all products are regulated to some degree by customers and customer expectations, and we're trying to develop a newer technology and really scale it to production. I think, and to do that, we need things that will help customers understand the technology, understand what's important, understand the impacts, giving them some guidance to how they can create their own process control documents, things like that. So standards are a very good way to do that. And it's good to be part of the team that's trying to create a generic, I said, standard, high-level standard that everybody can use, trying to adopt their own standards to model them against, because we would have our own standards that be unique to our specific platforms and equipment and materials and things like that. So it's a good guiding document to do that. So I've enjoyed it. It's been my first experience on a standards committee. So it's been educational and it's been good.
Steve, you're up next.
Yeah, no, I would just echo a lot of what Dan and Rick both said. I think to make a good standard, you have to have the experts informing what goes into the standard. It's only as good as the people who are contributing. And so, there's a strong interest for the the three of our companies to really put the time and energy into it to make sure that it captures really the heart of what binder jetting is. And so I think that's been fun and interesting to work with these guys who are kind of competitors, but also great guys. And sort of dance around a little bit, but we're all thinking about the same things, and that's been fun. But at the same time, I think making sure that for me, Desktop Metal is aligned with where the industry is going, and that the industry is aligned with where Desktop Metal is going, and again, that sort of feedback to make sure that what we end up with is where we see it going, and having the opportunity. And I got volunteered to be on the standard, but having the opportunity to be on the standard, I think has been awesome for me.
Tyler, go ahead.
So I was introduced to additive manufacturing, God, it's been over a decade, and back in the Wild West of when people didn't know what they were doing and everybody was having to figure it out on their own. Picked up a lot of really good information, then went off to school and did my PhD in this field, and recognized that there was a lot that I could contribute beyond just the walls of the company that I worked for. And so knowing that a lot of what was being written at the time was brand new, and there was a definite need, as demonstrated by people that I knew on the committee already, that I felt that I could jump in and provide some sort of expertise, both in an academic and an industry background. So that's really how I got started in the standards body to begin with, and from there it's just really grown to be able to continue to provide some sort of scope and background from my experiences, both in industry and academia, that help to drive the adoption and the drafting of these documents at large. But that's really what drew me into the standards work to begin with.
Great. I think that from my perspective, one of the most interesting parts about serving on these committees is, first, what Steve mentioned, that you have competitors working together to create something. And the other thing is that you have representatives from almost the entire supply chain, essentially, who are working together to solve a problem. So I joined as an employee of an engine manufacturer, and I'm now a production partner. We have 3 machine OEMs and 2 powder producers. How do you think that all of you keep that perspective in mind, where you basically represent the interests of your company without representing the interests of your company? And feel free to answer in any order. Just unmute yourself and go for it.
Well, I would say I look at it from the perspective of the end user, right? Whether you're the purchaser or the supplier, the producer, if you will. So if you're the buyer or the producer, you both have a need, right, to be successful. And so it's looking at what can we provide to help them be successful, or to help them understand the technology, create their own standards of success. And so I look at it more from that perspective than I do looking at it from customers or competitors or anything like that. So we're looking at just the process in general, and there's many different ways to achieve certain things, but there are certain things that need to be achieved in the process, things that you need to monitor and control. And so being able to define that so customers can be educated, I think, is first and foremost what the needs are.
Yeah, and that's if I was going to echo especially one point of Rick's, it's that if there's one person missing from the committee, it's a customer, it's an end user. And I know that the way these standards work is it goes up through the SAE approval process. More and more people see the standard, comment on it, review it, send it back to us for further work. But, if we had 1 or 2 end users at this level of the committee also contributing to the standard, I could see where later steps in the process would go even smoother.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I think for me, I think the important thing is that, I don't say I fly a lot, but I fly enough where I want to make sure that I get to where I'm going, right? It's not like 1 in a million is okay, right? We all need to get to where we're going at the end of the day. And so even though it may not be our product or our area of interest, I think the important thing is that we try to bring what experience we do have in our understanding of engineering and material science and quality systems. And we bring those all together, much to the chagrin of many of the document sponsors who, get my comments. I try to always, push us to be better and to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward. We're approaching things from the technical need and a technically accurate, as Tyler said in our last working group. Yes, you are technically accurate. That we are putting us in a better place, where those of us outside of the room, when we're discussing these things or outside of authoring these documents, that we can be assured that even if they don't understand what we're talking about, what the intent is, that we're writing these to the point where somebody off the street can pick these up. It can be audited by a completely different set of people, and we can at least ensure the same level of requirements for those inside the rooms, outside the room. This in North America or anywhere else.
Awesome. I have a question from the floor. Are we encountering any resistance as we develop these standards? Who wants to take this?
Well, I'll say I haven't heard or seen any, other than John's.
This is my first standard, but so far it seems honestly like pretty smooth sailing. I mean, the fact that we're competitors working together, I don't feel internal resistance, and it seems like the standard is going through the normal balloting pretty smoothly.
John, do you want to answer that question for historical perspective for the committee?
I think there's different technical issues that there's been resistance on. What's the best way to get where we're trying to go? Whether it's in a laser powder bed machine, a contamination changeover, or a test for contamination after changeovers. Is it something that could be checked with chemistry versus through metallography? There's discussion about what is the easy way to do it, and does that actually get you anywhere, versus something that is more of a pain, but if anything's going to tell you something, it could be this more involved process. So there's a lot of these technical discussions about what is practical, what is easy, what is being done today, what people would like to be done. I don't think there's very much resistance in terms of, why are you working on this? I think we have a lot of stakeholder pull from the industry, from the aerospace users. I think we have a lot of support from the technical experts, and I think there's alignment that in the end we don't all want to be sitting in the corner, I guess, spinning our wheels doing the same exact thing 10 different places. That ultimately what was special 5 years ago isn't going to be special 5 years from now, and we can sort of relegate some of these more simplistic things, standardize, and focus on things that are more valuable use of our time and resources to hold as proprietary.
Something else I'd like to add is that unlike powder bed fusion, we, with the binder jetting activity, have gotten out in front a little bit of the demand by the aerospace industry. So we're in many ways ahead of that bow wave of adoption that we might expect to see in the future. Whereas before with powder bed fusion, and then with another document that I'm helping to work on with powder recycling, we're in some ways playing a little bit of catch up. And so in the case of recycling powder and then powder bed fusion, a lot of people have already in their minds figured out this is the best way to do it. And so trying to get a whole bunch of people to kind of coalesce behind a standard that then everybody would like to march to make parts for the aerospace industry is more challenging than if you're out in front of the adoption curve. So we're fortunate right now with the binder jetting that there's not a lot of resistance because we're kind of doing a lot of the work well in front of that need. So the timing is right for this particular document in question.
I think that actually speaks to another question from the floor. Are there related standards or activities that we could allow leverage or reference? So I'll start the answer and then pass it off to the rest of the panelists. But I think that the spec that we most leverage is the first series of specifications that the committee put out, which are the laser powder bed fusion, commonly known as DMLS, specs for nickel alloy 625. Those specs basically laid out the skeletal framework for how the committee views control, process control, key variables for the powder bed fusion process. So my question to the panel is, how did you find that the binder jetting specs were similar and different as you were writing this first one?
Well, I'll start and say that the biggest difference is that our process, such as it is, the actual binder jetting, what we're writing the specification for, and some of the stuff around, isn't the end of the process, kind of like it is in laser powder bed fusion. So I just point that out as the first difference. Like there's kind of that whole gluing and sintering to full density, and that's obviously controlling those kinds of variables is a big difference.
So just to expand on that, because that's what I was also going to mention, is that for laser powder bed fusion or DED or other techniques that we've covered in the committee, we've sort of said the end of printing is the end of the process. And then after that, you can go do your post-processing, your machining, your heat treatment, and then we'll come back and we'll do the properties at the end. And with binder jetting, we basically said there's no way you can do that because the dimensional shrinkage and distortion, the mechanical properties are all tied to the machine, the binder, and the material, the powder, the PSD. All of these things come together, and your center profile is partly tied or correlated to what your starting point is. So there's really no way to deconvolute the two and treat the printing aspect separate from the curing, sintering, binding, debinding, sintering portions. So that was a big difference. Instead of treating it as more or less a pre-form that was assumed to need subsequent post-processing, the binder jetting is sort of enveloping more of the process than just the printing step.
Anybody else?
I think that you hit the nail on the head right there with the fact that with this process, I mean, for us, it was going beyond just the printer, right? There was a lot of aspects to after the printing process, the steps in the process to make the parts meet the requirements, the materials meet properties, and those things. So you had to think holistically of the whole process, even outside of just the printer manufacturing. A lot of the equipment and stuff that's used, so very important in this process.
I think one of the things that we've had to balance is, and I get the impression it's more so with the binder jetting spec than with maybe some of the other specs, there might be bigger differences between the processes that each of us represent, each of the OEMs. And so finding the balance as we write the spec to encompass the important parts of each of the processes as they are mainly similar, but in important areas different, so that when we come up with a spec, it covers all the important parts for all the processes, but it's still flexible enough to accommodate each of the different intricacies of each process. And that's been a little bit of a balance.
And I'll say, Hallee, to answer the other half of that question, there were enough similarities that we started with a laser spec, right? So, like you at least had defined what is a powder bed, what is a build volume, what is a building box, what is a piston, what is a recoater, so there were some things we could build on and whole things we had to eliminate and rebuild.
Yeah. So question for my powder producers, and John, you're going to love this. So I think we skipped over something. So how is powder feedstock standardized? Are different powder making technologies considered? So I think we skipped over the discussion of the material or the powder process and how that was considered in the standards. John and Tyler, do you want to talk about that for a minute?
I can start, and Tyler can fill in if I skip over anything. So the SAE standards are sort of a tiered approach. So the part, as you would write it on your print, will call out a finished material specification. That finished material specification would cover your heat treatment, information about your post-processing conditions and things like that. And it's also going to call out a process and a feedstock. So you have a high level spec, and then you're calling out, okay, binder jet with a powder feedstock, and a binder feedstock also. And then underneath that powder feedstock is a powder production process specification. So there's multiple levels of standards that are getting called out. So the powder production process specification, which I'm the lead author on, is AMS 7002, and that is intended to be process agnostic. We're working through revision A of that document to sort of clarify some terminology to even make it even more clear. I would say the one production technique that is maybe not supported right now it would be sort of the meltless or more chemical based production techniques, like the titanium meltless processes. We'll be working on those for revision B, but any of the standard production techniques, grinding, milling, atomization, prep, plasma atomize, we try to keep everything general so that we may call, instead of a melt rate, we may call it a material feed rate or something in terms of the key process variables, so that we aren't being prescriptive to which process has to be used to produce the material.
Tyler, anything to add?
I think John did a really good job describing that. I guess the only thing I might add is at present we have, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but we have powder feedstock documents that are specific to, say, powder bed fusion, and we have the expectation that we will be going down the same path for binder jetting at some point. But those will probably all reference at a high level the powder production process document, which is AMS 7002. So we've only really just started with the binder jetting world, in the sense that we're just effectively defining the process before we'll then back up, and then we'll start addressing feedstock and the chemistries associated with it that people are currently using. And then going forward, we'll have to then address mechanical properties that come out of the machines and through the entire process. There is a likelihood that we'll have to be very discrete in terms of which machine and binder combination and chemistry combination generates its own separate document altogether. The non-metallics committee already does this in a way with very specific polymer feedstock. Certain machine comes out with very prescriptive properties. There's a reason they do that that's a little bit different than what we've done in the past, with powder bed fusion being somewhat of a commodity approach. But other than that, I think we're going to mirror a lot of what we've already done on the metallic side. Excuse me.
So if I could just add something, just to clarify for anyone, the binder jet process specification does have requirements for material or feedstock, powder feedstock, for that to be controlled as part of your process control documentation. So there's mention of you need to control PSD, chemistry, other attributes, but there's no purchasing sort of ready feedstock specification, whereas we may have AMS 7001 with a chemistry in different sizes that can be used for laser powder bed fusion or directed energy deposition. There isn't an equivalent. Go out and buy your D90 less than 16 micron powder of 17.4 and go build parts. So I didn't want anybody to misconstrue it that we didn't take powder feedstock as being important to the binder jet process. Yes, that is in there, but we don't have the separate purchasing specification.
Okay, another question from the floor. How are the specs developed for binder jet technology influenced by the current specs for metal injection molding?
That's a fair question. I mean, I'll say that, I guess that's one of the things I've learned about the difference. We do talk at ExOne anyway about adhering to the F-35 standard. But, you know, I would say that this spec that we're writing is like kind of different than that in the sense that, okay, and again, it's just something that I had no idea how this all fit together until I've been doing it. And that, yeah, there's this powder feedstock spec, and there's going to be what we're doing with these actual executing the process specs, but then that's going to turn into some kind of a material property spec, right? And those material properties are going to need to be tested according to an ASTM standard that's been harmonized to be used with an additive manufacturing method. And so the standards kind of inform each other in strange ways, I've found.
I mean, the processes are in this standard are different up until maybe you get to sintering. Even the debind process is going to be somewhat different, but other than that, I mean, it's just a different process for what's in the standard, controlling the printing process and the importance. What are all the variables, and what are the importance of the variables, what are the impact of the variables on the process? Right, those are very unique to the printing process rather than the injection molding process.
Whereas in injection molding, you have an entire extra constituent in the binder. You have, you know, flow properties to be worried about in terms of separation. So there's rheological aspects. So in some ways, they're similar in that they involve an organic and a sintering process, but in many ways they are also different.
So it looks like we've got about 5 minutes left. This flew by, as I expected. We always have fun together. So I just want to give everyone on the panel a chance to give any last reflections about standards, binder jetting standards, or the committee in general. Dan, you can start.
Okay, great. First, I just want to thank all Link 3D and all the work that they've done in the other groups, Rapid and Rapid TCT, AeroDef, and SME or whatever. So thank you to all you guys. Thank you to the fellow panelists here. I mean, this was great, and I'm really glad we all got together to do this. And I'll just say, I'm sure that the other more experienced guys at Standards will say we need more volunteers, so it's not too late. Join up.
John?
I just see one question over here. Maybe I'll answer that. The question about spheritization. Spheritization would be included in AMS 7002, just for anybody wondering, since I didn't mention that specifically. I would sort of mirror the other thoughts, is that it's really an informative process. Hallee and I had never been part of a standards committee, and the rest of us before a few years ago. You learn quickly. You learn quickly that most of the people are pretty friendly, and you have something to offer, a different perspective, a different application, or you know, a pet aspect that's near and dear to your heart, that there's something that everyone can offer. Maybe not maybe you don't have time as a regular contributor to commit, but I would encourage everyone to you know, at least take a look at the ballots as they go out, and if they can offer some suggestions or input, get started that way.
Rick?
Yeah, I was just reading through a lot of the questions here myself. I mean, I think that maybe to what Dan says, obviously the more people that can review the standard or provide feedback or contribute to the authoring of these standards, the better they're going to be. Right? I mean, I had experiences of, you know, once this sub team, this panelists today, drafting the draft and then reviewing it back with our internal companies, the amount of comments that you get and feedback, and it just shows that, you know, you need more eyeballs you get on these things, the better. Right? And so, just to create a better standard. I think that you try to encompass everything. I think I was just reading one question here that says, is there a recommended coupon geometry to include in each run to help validate the process? And I would think this standard really covers, you know, a lot of things that you need to track during the whole process, and it's important, but which ones that you actually do for a given part of your application really depends on the requirements of the part. So the standard is meant to be very, very broad, but that doesn't mean you have to do everything that's in the standard for every part. You need to tailor it to the part, and the coupons that you would do, or what you need to require and what you need to test for really depends on what's the most important things for a given part or application that you need to control that's going to affect the end, have the most impact on the end performance of the part. So, just some thoughts.
Steve, you're next.
Yeah, no, I just want to echo a lot of what the other guys said. Again, this was my first standard, and it was really interesting. It was a lot of fun, actually. And it sounds like it's the start of a longer journey, and I'm looking forward to working with you guys over the coming months and years, hopefully, because we got a lot of work ahead of us, but it's cool. And it might not be for everyone. I think it does take a certain type of person to really get into the nitty gritty. And I think credit to Tyler for leading this group through. I think there were hour-long meetings where we focused on one sentence. maybe two, but at the end you step back and like we got it done, or it's not done, but it's in pretty good shape. So I look forward to more.
Tyler. You.
Oh, sorry. So I'll put a little bit of a human spin on it. The best part about coming to the standards world is that I get to interact with a lot of really wonderful and smart people that are outside of my own company. And we get to work on things that I think are problems that all of us face. And we get to help define and, as the name implies, standardize much of what the industry is going to look like going forward into the future. And that has an impact beyond just my career and my immediate impacts that I have on a day-to-day basis of my job. And so that's very rewarding in and of itself. And I look forward to the continued contributions that I can make. And I know that the more people that join in, the more different perspectives we will have, and the better our products as a standards body become, that we're going to be able to meet the needs of the industry at large and everybody that is participating. So that's one of the best things about working on these SDOs, is that I get to do a lot of really great work that benefits a lot of great people.
So Janet, give me 30 seconds. I know we're at time, but if you are interested in getting involved with our committee, go ahead and email me. It's Hallee, Hallee, @fastradius.com. John and I sit on the executive committee, so we can make sure that you get in touch with the right people. There are many levels of membership, from a mailing list recipient, so you're just kept involved, all the way up to a steering committee membership or a voting membership that comes with real tangible responsibility. So we'd love to get people involved. The base thing is that if you have any interest or a passion project for printing something ridiculous on a totally unique process, we welcome all document sponsors. So with that, thank you all very much. Don't hesitate to reach out. We have global membership, so please come join us. Thank you.
Thank you.